control your will, if I can control your will, then I can control your desires. If I can control your desires, I can.
The hand has 5 fingers, capable and powerful, with the ability to destroy as well as create. We have the power to stop and reverse the tides of time by making our awareness of abuse known to the powers of industry and their uncouth political arms. Only by raising this awareness and promoting personal peace within today's self-defeated society can we allow the planet a chance to avoid self-destruction. Open your eyes, open your mouths, close your hands, and make a fist. Those words, printed on the back of System of a Down's debut album, perfectly encapsulate what this record represents: creation and destruction in perfect balance. With the groundwork laid by their demo tapes, System of a Down had finally sharpened their chaotic energy into something both refined and unpredictable. System of a Down, which I'll be calling self-titled from now on to avoid confusion, is the band's debut album, released on June 30th, 1998, under American Recordings and produced by Rick Rubin. Initially, it found moderate success thanks to the singles Sugar and Spiders, both of which received heavy radio play and MTV rotation. The album peaked at 124 on the Billboard 200 and was certified gold in February 2000. Following Toxicity's massive success, Self-Titled was re-evaluated by the public, eventually going double platinum by 2002. Nowadays, Self-Titled is considered one of the most iconic releases of the 90s nu metal movement, a chaotic and politically charged introduction that gave System of a Down a promising start to their career. Personally, this is easily one of my top 3 System of a Down albums. The lyrics across the album were written by Serj Tankian, with most of the music being composed by Darren Malakian. Early versions of songs like X, which later appeared on Toxicity, alongside Honey and Temper, were originally planned for this album, but went unused for unknown reasons, and sadly, those versions have never resurfaced. Self-Titled runs for about 41 minutes and features 13 tracks. Its striking cover art, The Hand, originates from a 1928 propaganda poster by artist John Hartfield, titled Finger Hat Thy Hand. It was used by the Communist Party of Germany during the rise of the Third Reich, and it directly inspired the quote printed on the album's back cover. Before we dive into the track list, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow my Twitter. Like the last video, I've left timestamps in the description so you can easily skip between songs. On a final note, this is more of a historical, factual, and lyrical analysis video than one on music theory, which I'm not familiar with. Also, the length I'm spending on each track is proportional to the amount of information on them, so don't be surprised if the sections on Sugar and Spiders are much longer than the one on CUBErt, for example. Without further ado, let's dive into System of a Down from the beginning, starting with the opening track, Sweet Pea. Sweet Pea opens System of a Down's catalog with a mission statement. With lyrics written by Serj Tankian and music composed by Darren Malakian, it's the band's first proper introduction to the world, and it immediately establishes just how confrontational, chaotic, and unapologetic this album is going to be. The song first appeared on Demo Tape 1, in a version that feels noticeably restrained compared to the final release. It's slower, sludgier, and far more grounded, with harsher vocals, but less of the explosive opening chaos that came to define the album version. Most notably, it lacks the iconic guitar part in the song's climax, almost as if the band hadn't quite figured out how chaotic they wanted the song to be. By the time Demo Tape 4 rolled around, Sweet Pea had been reworked again into a form that's much closer to the final studio version, although it still features a slightly different intro. This shit sounds cursed as hell. It's a fascinating snapshot of the band, refining their identity in real time. When compared to these early versions, the album one feels like a controlled detonation. It launches immediately with that amazing opening riff and never lets up, hitting like a sledgehammer right out the gate. As an opener, it's perfect, not just because it's heavy, but because it's strange, blasphemous, and uncomfortable enough in a way that sets the tone for System of a Down's entire discography. Lyrically, Sweet Pea is often interpreted as a critique of religious hypocrisy, fanaticism, and sexual abuse within organized religion, particularly within the Catholic Church. Lines like, "Lie naked on the floor and let the Messiah go for our souls," "You die for her philosophy," and the infamous, "Why won't the fuck my way to the garden?" are deliberately offensive and provocative, confronting taboo subjects head-on with zero subtlety. This isn't just for shock's sake. It's Surge using extreme imagery to expose how religious authority can be weaponized for mass control, manipulation, and corruption. That fearless, confrontational approach in their lyricism will become one of System of a Down's defining traits, perfectly embodying the tone of the album. Musically, the track mirrors its themes perfectly. Surge's abrupt vocal shifts, Darren's jagged riffs, and the band's sudden dynamic changes in tempo create an atmosphere of instability and tension. Even by self-titled standards, Sweet Pea feels unhinged in the best possible way. While it's not one of the band's most mainstream songs, it's become a massive live staple over the years. It was first played at their very first concert at the Roxy on May 28, 1995, and since then has had over 480 performances. Interestingly enough, however, it wasn't always a concert staple. From 1995 to 1997, it was only played a handful of times compared to the amount of shows they performed. All in all, this makes Sweet Pea the second most played song in their entire catalog. For many fans, including me, Sweet Pea perfectly captures that raw and chaotic style of early Sode, perfectly setting the tone for the rest of the album. No follows immediately after Sweet Pea, and somehow manages to keep that momentum going. No is the second track on System of a Down, with lyrics by Serj Tankian, and one of the only songs which was composed by not just Darren Malakian, but also Serj and Shavo Odachian. That collaborative nature gives this song a slightly different energy, feeling less like the singular vision like many Darren composed songs, and more like a collective outburst. The track first appeared on Demo Tape 3, and while that version is structurally very similar to the final studio recording, it has a rougher, more jagged sound that gives it a distinct charm, which I honestly quite like. The production is raw, the edges are sharper, and certain vocal deliveries, like the growl at the end of Able to Fuck Your Mother's Earth, hit harder because of that unpolished quality. Serj described No in a 1997 interview with Rock City News as a free spirit song, elaborating on its central theme of resisting conformity and blind obedience. He explained, "I will never feed off the evergreen luster of your heart, the power of not falling into the system. I look to question things that I don't understand. I research them and become educated. It's my nature." That philosophy is baked into every part of the song. Much like Sweet Pea, No can also be read as an anti-dogma track, challenging religious authority, societal expectations, and the idea of accepting beliefs without question. Whereas Sweet Pea is more direct and attacks hypocrisy with brute force and criticism, No feels more introspective, urging awareness, skepticism, and self-education. Musically, the song is textbook a self-titled System of a Down. The riffs are angular and aggressive, the tempo shifts are abrupt, and Serj's vocal delivery moves seamlessly between poetic and screaming. There's a sense of barely contained chaos throughout the track, like it could collapse at any moment. That tension is part of what makes No so compelling. It constantly keeps the listener on edge. Despite being more of a deep cut, No has seen significant live play over the years, with roughly 250 performances, more than any song from the band's last 3 albums, including BYOB. It was a setlist staple as soon as 1997 and was regularly played through 2005. After their hiatus in the late 2000s, however, No has only reappeared a handful of times in 2011, 2015, and 2018. Strangely too, it's only been performed once since 2018, at a show in 2024, which feels like a missed opportunity. It's a song that perfectly encapsulates what early System of a Down was all about. And that drum fill at the end of the song, transitioning into Sugar, is just downright euphoric. Sugar is System of a Down's first official single, and arguably the song that put them on the map. Released on May 24, 1998, it quickly became one of their most recognizable tracks, a perfect storm of manic energy, absurdist humor, and pure chaos. Along with its equally chaotic music video, which received heavy rotation on MTV, Sugar's success helped push the band out of the underground scene and straight into the metal mainstream, earning them spots opening for Slayer and Metallica's 2000 Summer Sanitarium tour. The music video, directed by Nathan Cox, captures early System of a Down in their most raw and political form. It opens with a segment of a news reporter breaking down live on air, a direct homage to the 1976 film Network, where the protagonist, news anchor Howard Beale, loses his sanity while railing against media corruption. What follows is a barrage of imagery. The band dressed in bizarre attire, performing in front of a burnt American flag, spliced with scenes from the 1927 film Metropolis, random shots, and real historical footage. The video culminates in a brief clip of the 1953 Upshot Knothole Grabble nuclear test before abruptly cutting to black. It's an assault of information, audiovisual overstimulation that perfectly mirrors the song's themes of media manipulation and societal decay. The pacing and surreal edits evoke the same kind of sensory chaos that anime Neon Genesis Evangelion's opening, Cruel Angel's Thesis, is famous for, as well as the fragmented absurdism of Serial Experiment's Lane. Musically, Sugar is the perfect blend of what makes System of a Down unique. It swings between manic verses, psychotic growls, and absurdist humor, all tied together by Darren shouting, "Sugar!" Chavo's hypnotic bass line, and John Dalmayan's pounding drums. Like many of the songs, the lyrics, written entirely by Serj Tankian, resist definitive lyrical meaning. Some fans have theorized that the title, Sugar, is potentially a metaphor for addiction, either to substances like cocaine or to consumer culture in general, a theory supported by the "Aspartame Kills" tagline, which flashes on screen during the video. Others see it as a satire to America's overstimulation and numbness to violence, as reflected by verse 2, which details how easy it is for mentally ill individuals to obtain weapons. The iconic kombucha mushroom people line, referencing a Chinese fermented tea that literally requires sugar to brew, only deepens the surreal theme of the song. Drummer John Dalmayan once reflected on the song's unexpected mainstream success in an interview. "We never expected Sugar or Spiders to be embraced by MTV or to be on the radio. We thought we would be a very underground band, but for some reason, the mainstream has kind of accepted it." And in my opinion, he's absolutely right. It's miraculous that something so chaotic broke into the mainstream, even landing the song into games such as MTV Sports Skateboarding and Madden NFL 10. The song actually dates all the way back to Demo Tape 1, where it appears as the opening track, though it's almost unrecognizable from the final version. The song originally had a much slower tempo, muffled vocals, altered lyrics, and an overall sludgier tone, more like an experiment than a real finished track. The only existing recordings have such low-quality vocals that they're nearly incomprehensible without hindsight. Darren's "Sugar!" however remains crystal clear, which is really funny. By its reappearance on Demo Tape 4, it had evolved into something much closer to the version from the final album. Faster, sharper, but with Darren originally shouting "Sako!" instead of "Sugar!" at the start of the second verse. In Serj Tankian's 2024 biography, Down with the System, he reveals that the song's climax dates back to their earlier band Soil. Not knowing what to do with it, Shovel came up with the bass line one day, which inspired Darren to write the entire song overnight. Surge admits that the kombucha mushroom people line really just came from nonsense he'd overheard and thought sounded vaguely cult-like, and the iconic sugar shout was a random addition by Darren that worked so well they just kept it in the final song. To this day, Surge himself is unsure what the song is really about. He describes Sugar as a "fuck you" song, directly citing it as their own angsty version of Rage Against the Machine's Killing in the Name. The all-over-the-place vocals and the schizophrenic rambling in the second verse was completely deliberate, reflecting his stream-of-consciousness style of writing. Since its live debut in 1995 at the Roxy Theater, Sugar has been performed over 500 times, making it the single most played song in System of a Down's entire discography. It's their go-to closing song, and for really good reason. There's no better way to end a show than on the explosive climax of the song. Sugar is the song that introduced the world to System of a Down, and even 3 decades later, it still remains one of their greatest. Suggestions is the 4th song on System of a Down, with lyrics by Serj Tankian and composed by Darren Malakian. Unlike every other song on the band's debut, it's unique in that it never appeared on any of the demo tapes. As a result, its first known incarnation is already in its fully realized form on the album, which explains why it has relatively little documented history compared to the other tracks. That lack of early versions is further supported by its live timeline. The earliest known performances only date back to October 31st, 1997, just 8 months before the album's release. What's even more interesting is how little the song changed between stage and studio. The earliest clip I could find, from their March 14th, 1998 show at the Press Club in Sacramento, California, sounds almost identical to the final album version. The structure, tempo, and vocal delivery are all firmly locked in, suggesting, no pun intended, that Suggestions had probably already been recorded, or at the very least finalized by that point. In an early discography which consisted almost entirely of evolving demo material, it stands out as a song that arrived fully formed. Musically, Suggestions features one of Serj Tankian's most powerful vocal performances on the entire album. His delivery whiplashes violently between hushed, paranoid murmurs and explosive growls, creating a constant sense of unease. The panicked climax, "It's all over," is a pure chef's kiss, perfectly capturing the song's spiraling descent. On a side note, I can't unhear this, so you'll have to suffer with me. Serj's screams in this song sound exactly like SpongeBob. Yeah, I know. Lyrically, the song is often interpreted as a critique of the mass media and institutional power, particularly how those in authority view and manipulate the working class. The imagery frames common people as expendable insects, with the narrative told through a metaphorical ship under attack by a battalion. The narrator begins in a safe position atop a light post, a detached vantage point symbolizing the media's elevated role as observers and owners of the narrative, before eventually being overwhelmed and forced to flee. It's a bleak and claustrophobic perspective that fits perfectly with the album's broader themes of control, dehumanization, and paranoia. While far from one of their most popular songs, Suggestions remains a fan-favorite deep cut in a genuine setlist statement, having been performed nearly 470 times live, just behind Sugar and Sweet Pea. Just like those tracks, it's also one of my personal favorites, capturing the raw and chaotic energy of early System of a Down with just a touch of absurdity. And that chaos only makes the sun shift into the next track, the melodic and heavy Spiders, hit even harder. Spiders is the 5th track on System of a Down, with lyrics by Serj Tankian and composed by Darren Malakian. It marks one of the most important tonal pivots on the entire album. Coming right off the sheer chaos of Suggestions, this is the first moment where the album slows down and lets that dread sink in. It's a darker, quieter, and far more restrained than anything before it, proving early on that System of a Down didn't need speed or shock value to be unsettling. Unlike most of the album, Spiders has very little documented history. It first appeared on Demo Tape 4 under the working title Slow, and aside from the removal of some strange vocal effects in the intro and the cleaner production, of course, the song is nearly identical to the final version. In a way, that lack of evolution is the story. Spiders arrived almost fully formed, suggesting that the band knew exactly what they wanted to do with it from the start. Lyrically, this is one of the most overtly conceptual songs on the album, and yet the album booklet describes it very bluntly in a single sentence. Your thoughts and dreams are no longer sacred, as they are exposed to a weapon known as remote viewing and monitoring. Spiders is often interpreted as a condemnation of government surveillance and regulation, specifically referencing the V-chip, a device introduced in North American televisions in the 1990s that allowed parents, and by extension institutions, to block television content based on age ratings and content ratings. Basically, the precursor to modern parental controls. In the song's imagery, the spiders all in tune symbolize these systems operating flawlessly, whilst those in power watch from above. If this sounds familiar, Hypnotize is very similar thematically. That spider imagery runs deeper than just the lyrics. The computer chip depicted on the single's cover, which also appears on the back of the album, resembles a spider, reinforcing the idea of something invasive, mechanical, and unseen. Spiders weave webs to trap prey that never realizes it's caught, a metaphor that fits perfectly with the song's themes of unseen mental manipulation and control. Lines like, "Dreams are made, winding through my head, before you know, awake," before the subject even understands what's being taken from them, their thoughts and dreams are no longer sacred, no longer theirs. Musically, Spider stands apart from pretty much every song on Self-Titled, and sounds more like Aerials from Toxicity. The main riff is simple and repetitive, creating tension through restraint rather than aggression. Surge's vocals stay mostly restrained, until the song's climax where he lets everything spill out. It's haunting, ominous, and unsettling in a way no other track on the album quite recreates, while still accessible enough to break into the mainstream. One of two songs, including Sugar, that brought them into it. Spiders was released as the album's second single on February 10th, 1999, complete with a high-budget, abstract music video directed by Charlie Durr. Featuring actress Jolene Towers, the video mirrors the song's themes visually, and its visuals are surprisingly high quality even by today's standards. It became System of a Down's first truly accessible song, earning mainstream radio play and heavy MTV rotation. It later appeared in the soundtrack for horror movie Scream 3, and as a playable song in Rock Band 4. Despite being one of their most recognizable songs, and the second most popular from their debut, Spiders has been played live surprisingly sparingly, with just over 200 performances, mostly concentrated between 1998 and 2005. It's only been played occasionally since, which is weird considering Sweet Pea and Suggestions have been played more than twice as much despite being far nicher songs. Still, its legacy is undeniable. If Sugar introduced the world to System of a Down's chaos, Spiders proved that they could be melancholic, and that contrast between chaos and control is what made them impossible to ignore. But just as Spiders fades out and lulls you back into a false sense of calm, you immediately snap back to reality with DDevil, one of the most aggressive and unhinged songs on the album. For those that control the central nervous system, control society, and the world. DDevil is track 6 on Self-Titled, with lyrics by Serj Tankian and music by both Shava Odajian and Darren Malakian. It's the shortest and easily one of the weirdest and most chaotic songs on the album, clocking in at barely over a minute and a half. Unlike some of the more polished and thematically heavy tracks on the album, DDevil leans fully into absurdity and surreal imagery. Lyrically, it seems to be a jab at artistic plagiarism. Plagiarized existence exists among the writers of the world, shake your spear at Shakespeare, combined with a critique of general human stupidity and media frenzy. When combined with Serj's exaggerated vocal delivery, it creates a fever dream of the song wrapped in a quite funny package. The song first appeared on Demo Tape 4, but there's nothing too noteworthy about that version. It's nearly identical to the final recording, aside from slightly different vocal delivery. The title itself has sparked a lot of speculation over the years. Some fans assume it's just a stuttered version of the devil, as seen in the chorus of the song where they pronounce it normally, or even after... What the fuck am I reading? Double D cup boobs? Huh. Well, this is the band that made Siguro, after all, so that doesn't seem too far-fetched. It could equally be named after System of a Down's publishing company, DDevil Music, founded in the late 90s. Or vice versa, but since there's no confirmed timeline, both theories are equally possible. Surprisingly, despite its unpopularity and obscurity, DDevil has a really large live history, clocking in at over 170 performances, which is more than every song from Hypnotize, except for Kill Rock and Roll. Still, it hasn't been played a single time since 2017, which is a shame. Despite its short runtime, DDevil leaves a strong mark on the album, perfectly setting the stage for Soil, one of the darkest and most emotionally charged songs. Soil is the 7th track on System of a Down. As usual, the lyrics were written by Serj Tankian, with music by Darren Malika. The song already carries a surprising amount of history in its title alone, as it shares the same name with Serj and Darren's former band, Soil. As detailed in Serj's 2024 memoir, Down with the System, the band was actually named after one of their earliest songs, this one. More importantly, however, Soil was written about one of Serj's best friends from high school, Paul, and Serj describes Paul as outgoing and charismatic, with a darker, edgier side. Over time, that darkness grew, and the two drifted apart before Paul took his own life in his early 20s. His death hit Serj hard, and he initially wrote fragmented passages about it in one of his notebooks, where many of System of a Down's song lyrics originate from. Lines like, "Shot the gun that startled my life," "Friends for years," "Images in red," and "For reasons undefined" would eventually be coaxed into the song. The last line in particular, "For reasons undefined," became a sentiment that echoed throughout Serj's life. He believes it reflects a painful truth about many, the lack of clear answers. He later connected this feeling to the losses of other friends, including Soundgarden and Audioslave frontman Chris Cornell, as well as chef and travel documentarian Anthony Bourdain. Ultimately, Soil captures Serj's emotional response to Paul's death: angry, embittered, confused, and grasping for understanding. Or if not understanding, at least some sort of acceptance. All his memories of friendship are now inseparable to the image of Paul's death. "My memories are of fun and friendship." The breakdown, "Don't you realize, evil, lives in the motherfucking skin," pushes this idea further, referring to the depression and intrusive thoughts that led to Paul's. It alludes to how invisible that pain was to those around him. Through this, the song serves as a reminder that a person's outward appearance is not necessarily reflective of what they're experiencing internally, and their pain and emotions. Serj notes that this sentiment resurfaced years later during an incident shortly before 9/11, where for the first and only time, he returned a call from a deeply depressed fan and tried to support him mentally. As we know, the following day, the world changed forever, and the call took on a haunting weight. The song's final line, "Why the fuck did you take him away from us, you motherfucker?" wasn't part of the original version. Soil first appeared as the closing track on Demo Tape 2 in 1996, and the line was later incorporated into live performances around 1997, before making it onto the album. Serj describes the line as an interrogation of God for all the planet's sins and injustices, an angry howl of mourning, as well as an acknowledgement that some parts of life are hard to fully comprehend. Musically, Soil is classic self-titled, relentlessly heavy, driven by crushing guitars, pounding drums, and one of Serj's most intense vocal performances, especially that final scream. Aside from the closing line, which was originally just a short pause before the final breakdown, the album version isn't drastically different from the demo, highlighting just how quickly System of a Down solidified their sound. Soil has been played live roughly 120 times and was an early setlist staple from 1997 to 2002. Since then, it's only resurfaced sporadically, once in 2004, 2013, and 2023, as well as 11 times during the Wake Up the Souls tour in 2015. It's unfortunate, but Soil is really the emotional core of the album in my opinion. And with that, it segues perfectly into the next song, the explosive War. We first fought the heathens in the name of religion, then communism, and now in the name of drugs and terrorism. Our excuses for global domination always change. War is the 8th track from System of a Down, with lyrics written by Serj Tankian and music by Darren Malakian. The song serves as a broad condemnation of war itself, specifically targeting religion, the Crusades, foreign policy adventurism, and the manufactured moral justifications used to sanctify international conflict. At its core, war denounces the real driving force behind these events: power struggles. The song pulls inspiration from both contemporary conflicts in the 1990s, particularly wars in the Middle East, as well as older religious wars such as the Crusades. Time and time again, humanity wages war for wealth, control, and material gain, only to justify it with grand narratives of morality or divine purpose. This idea directly echoes the religious hypocrisy critiqued earlier on the album, in tracks like Sweet Pea and No. One of the earliest excuses for war was the claim that God commanded it, most infamously used during the 12th and 13th century Christian crusades against the Muslims, which is summed up bluntly in the lyrics, "We will fight the heathens." Several lines also reference historical conflicts involving Armenia, including battles against Turkic forces, who victored over the Seljuks, and when the Holy Land was taken. While the justifications shift over time, from religion to communism to drugs to terrorism, the underlying motive, power struggles, never changes. This idea would later be revisited even more explicitly on Bubbles from Steal the Song. In his 2024 memoir, Down with the System, Serj describes war as a standout moment in their early live shows. Part of this came from the chorus, "We will fight the heathens," which he recalls sending crowds into absolute chaos. The song may have also played a role in Rick Rubin signing the band. Serj recounts seeing him laughing in the back of a club during one of their performances, and realizing something important in that moment. If he wanted to confront issues like genocide denial, or systematic injustice on a larger scale, he'd need to use the machinery of major corporations, record labels included, to amplify that message. As Serj puts it, you must enter a room to destroy it. The philosophy that ultimately led them to sign with American Recordings. War is also one of only 3 tracks from the album to receive a music video, despite never being released as a single. Rather than the traditional concept video like Sugar and Spiders, it consists of live performance footage and archival war imagery. Notably, the song isn't dubbed over with the studio version, but instead uses the version of the song from Demo Tape 3. The video opens with footage from the Yugoslav wars in the 1990s, as Serj repeatedly chants, "Freedom will only be available for death," growing louder with each repetition, before cutting to Darren's opening riff. Serj then shouts, "Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. God wants you to go to war," before the song fully kicks in. The rest of the video is a stark black and white recording of an early System of a Down show. While effective, it remains one of the band's least popular music videos, only slightly outperforming those for the 2020 singles Protect the Land and Genocidal Humanoids. The Demo Tape 3 version of War isn't drastically different from the final recording, aside from slightly altered drums, recorded before John Dolmayan replaced Andy Kachaturian, but a noticeably different bridge. In the video, the bridge is slower, Serj's vocal delivery varies, background vocals differ, and some noises were later removed. Even more interesting, however, is an alternate live version the band has occasionally performed, featuring a Middle Eastern-inspired intro, added keyboards and synths, new backing vocals, and altered lyrics, further emphasizing the song's historical and cultural themes. Musically, War is one of the most explosive tracks on Self-Titled. It balances sharp riffs with sudden tempo shifts, and some of Serj's most theatrical vocal performances. The song constantly feels on the verge of spiraling out of control, which mirrors the chaos and hypocrisy which it condemns. Alongside Sweet Pea and No, War remains a fan favorite live track despite not being one of the band's biggest hits. It has been performed over 400 times, making it the fourth most played System of a Down song. It also appeared in the soundtrack for PS1 games Apocalypse and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, albeit only the beta version for that. Personally, much like Sweet Pea, War is one of my favorites from the album, a perfect example of the raw and chaotic energy of 90s System of a Down. That intensity only makes the next track, Mind, feel like a sharp and unsettling departure. Mind is the 9th track on System of a Down. The lyrics were written by Serj Tankian, with music composed by not only Darren Malakian, but also by Serj Tankian and Shavo Odajian, making it one of only 2 songs on the album with all 3 contributing to the composition, including No. Mind is also notable for being the longest song in System of a Down's entire discography, clocking in at 6 minutes and 16 seconds, nearly a minute longer than the runner-up, Holy Mountains. The song first appeared on Demo Tape 4 in 1997, in a version that's already remarkably close to the final studio recording, just rougher and less polished. Earlier live versions show slightly more variation, such as its appearance at the April 21st, 1996 show at the Dragonfly, where the song featured a different verse. Even at this early stage, however, Mind was clearly already fully formed, further highlighting how quickly the band had locked in their sound. Musically, Mind is a complete outlier in System of a Down's catalog. It's slow, oppressive, and brooding for much of its runtime, punctuated by sudden, violent interruptions. It's arguably the band's heaviest, unsettling, and arguably most experimental song, less concerned with hooks or momentum, and more focused on atmosphere and psychological tension. Lyrically, Mind appears abstract at first glance, but a quote from the album booklet offers a much clearer look. Mind control technology has been used by the CIA since the 1950s as part of their non-lethal covert weapons program. With that context, the chorus line, "Free thinkers are dangerous," reads as a direct critique of governments fearing independent thought. The repeated phrase, spoken at both the beginning and end of the song, "Look at each other, look at each other," evokes a hypnotic mind control state, almost as if the listener is being lulled to deep sleep at the start, only to be forced back into it at the end. In contrast, the repeated cries, "Go away," feel like sudden moments of lucidity, the protagonist briefly recognizing the manipulation and desperately trying to resist it. In total, Mind has about 160 performances. It's worth noting that the song was also featured on the soundtrack of a poorly received sequel to the Blair Witch Project in the year 2000, the only non-single from this album to be featured in another piece of media. Mind was first performed at System of a Down's very first concert at the Roxy on May 28, 1995. By 1998, it had become a setlist staple, and it was played frequently between 1999 and 2001. After 2002, however, the song largely disappeared from regular rotation, only resurfacing sporadically, most notably during their 2017 and 2025 tours. Even then, it isn't played consistently in its entirety, similar to Dreaming from Hypnotize. Though, in this case, it's less about complexity and more about the sheer length of the song. During their 2025 tour, Mind was performed live in full for the first time since 2011, which itself was the first time since 2004, showing just how rare the song has become in modern setlists. And just when you think the album can't get any stranger, Peephole immediately proves you wrong, doubling down on the album's most experimental ideas.
Lazy, baked. The song's about fucking getting high.
Peephole is the 10th track on Self-Titled. As with most of the album, the lyrics were written by Serj Tankian, with music composed by Darren Malakian. Much like the preceding track, Mind, Peephole stands out as one of the strangest songs in the band's catalog. Instead of leaning into the thrash metal-like aggression heard elsewhere on the album, he adopts a bizarre, almost polka or circus-like rhythm, while retaining the band's signature heaviness and tension. The song opens with a unique 30-second ambient intro, an abstract and layered soundscape with faint, barely audible vocal fragments from later in the song breaking through. The intro is completely absent from the song's first appearance on Demo Tape 3, where the track otherwise appears in a form nearly identical to the final version. Early live performances, dating back to September 2nd, 1996 at the Dragonfly, also show how fully formed the song already was, aside from a slightly faster tempo. Like several tracks on Self-Titled, Peephole reached its final form unusually early in the band's history. Lyrically, Peephole is often interpreted as a song about altered states of consciousness, i.e., drug use. Lines like, "When your stars are baked," strongly point in that direction, and this is reinforced by both the album booklet and the band themselves. The booklet quotes a New Scientist report from the 90s, stating that the World Health Organization suppressed findings showing marijuana to be safer than alcohol or tobacco. Furthermore, Darren Malakian directly confirmed the song's meaning during a 1999 show, where he bluntly stated,
"This song's about smoking weed, and if you got it, smoke it."
The title, Peephole, itself works as a metaphor which complements the lyrics, representing a narrow and distorted way of viewing reality. Just like how a real peephole warps perception of the outside world through a fisheye lens, the song suggests a limited or altered worldview distorted by intoxication, the media, or social conditioning. It's left ambiguous whether the song is advocating for or against drug use, however. While by far one of their least popular songs, Peephole was played fairly regularly between 1998 and 2000. Since then, it's only appeared sporadically, with only 20 performances since 2001 at the time of writing, making it even rarer live than Mind. Despite that, it remains a fascinating and bizarre step on the album, a strange and psychedelic detour that only deepens the band's unpredictability. It only makes the final 3 tracks even more chaotic. And with that, we arrive at the least popular non-B-side track in System of a Down's discography, CUBErt. The song is the 11th track on System of a Down, and stands out as an oddity on the album, as its lyrics were written by both Serj Tankian and Darren Malakian, while the music was composed solely by Darren. CUBErt has very little history. It first appeared as the opening track on Demo Tape 4, and unlike every other song on the album, it didn't debut live until after the album's release, the first performance being on July 22nd, 1998 at the Opera House in Toronto, Canada. This makes it the only self-titled track to premiere live post-release. Lyrically, the song is quite simple, but criticizes societal apathy and intellectual complacency, what Serj describes as becoming cliché people. It portrays society as passive, lazy spectators, watching the world collapse around them like a movie. Don't leave your seats now. Popcorn everywhere canned. The title obviously references the 1982 arcade game CUBErt, a repetitive and simple game built around jumping on a pyramid of cubes, trying to change the color of all of them while avoiding enemies. The imagery from the game feeds directly into the song's themes, most explicitly in the line, "A pyramid mindfuck," which can be read as a jab at social hierarchies and mindless conformity. In his 2024 memoir, Down With The System, Serj explains that songs like this one and DDevil were meant to weave in moments of humor, whimsy, and tongue-in-cheek absurdity. Much like DDevil, CUBErt is one of the shortest tracks on the album, clocking in at just under 2 minutes. It's fast, heavy, chaotic, and silly, with even its awkward capitalization reinforcing the song's strange energy. The Demo Tape 4 version is nearly identical to the final release, differing only slightly with more monotone vocals in the verse and lower-pitched opening notes. Live, the song has always been a rarity. It appeared sporadically between 1998 and 2002, and has only resurfaced 14 times during the 2015 Wake Up the Souls tour, and once ever since in 2024. Despite its obscurity, CUBErt, just like DDevil, is one of the most underrated songs on the album, and would fit right in on a setlist because it's just so short. While CUBErt is a fairly simple critique, the following song, Darts, turns that frustration outwards. Darts is the 12th track on System of a Down, with lyrics written by Serj Tankian and music composed by Darren Malakian. Much like Sweet Pea and No, the song serves as a sharp criticism of the stupidity, hypocrisy, and unquestioned authority which Serj sees in organized religion. While the song doesn't have much developmental history, it's one of the album's densest tracks thematically, an idea which is made explicit through a quote in the album booklet. Why do old societies hold the pantheon of 12 gods to be true, while modern societies generally have one god? The title, Darts, functions as a metaphor for blind faith and belief, treated almost like a game of chance, which ironically contrasts the real game of darts, a game of skill. Here, religious doctrines are thrown around and accepted without thoughts or accountability, like darts. The song's choruses rely heavily on repetition. Art thou, not human man art thou, mocks religious self-righteousness and pretentiousness, while Arises did the gods Ninti and Ishkur reinforces this critique through references to ancient gods. Ninti, the Sumerian goddess of life, and Ishkur, motherfucker! The storm god, are both figures who were once worshipped, yet are now entirely forgotten. Their inclusion ties directly back to the booklet's question, highlighting how belief systems rise, fall, and are arbitrarily replaced throughout history. Fittingly, Darts is the 12th track on the album, almost certainly a direct reference to this pantheon of 12 gods. Musically, Darts is tight, aggressive, and rhythmically rigid, mirroring the dogmatism it critiques. The final studio version is nearly identical to the one found on Demo Tape 4, but adds loud clock sounds during and after the bridge, an element absent from early demos and live versions. These ticking sounds complement the line, "Clock men, for they will fail," evoking the passage of time and reinforcing the idea that even the most absolute belief systems will eventually expire. Finally, the closing line, "Can you tell me? I don't know," circles back to the booklet's question, leaving the song deliberately unsolved. Darts first appeared at Billboard Live on October 14, 1996, and became a regular part of System of a Down setlists from 1998 to 2000. Since then, it has only resurfaced in small batches, most notably during the 2015 and 2017 tours, making a total of nearly 150 performances. The live performances of the song are well known for Serj sometimes meowing during the bridge of the song, which is low-key pretty funny. An absurd, almost mocking gesture that undercuts the seriousness of the song's lyrics. Interestingly, this also happens in the studio version of the song as well, but it's far more subtle. I actually didn't notice it myself until after a few listens. And while Darts questions how belief systems are formed, followed, and eventually discarded, the album's closing track, P.L.U.K, takes that idea one step further, highlighting what happens when those beliefs are used to justify violence, and the irreversible consequences that arise. System of a Down would like to dedicate this song to the memory of the 1.5 million victims of the Armenian genocide, perpetrated by the Turkish government in 1915. P.L.U.K is the 13th and final track from System of a Down, with lyrics by Serj Tankian and music composed by Darren Malakian. It's the album's most overtly political song, and despite its obscurity, one of the most important in the band's entire catalog. Every member of System of a Down is Armenian, and with P.L.U.K, the band directly confronts the Armenian genocide, and just as importantly, the continued denial of it by the modern Turkish government. It can be considered as the sister song to Holy Mountains from Hypnotize, as it's very similar thematically and lyrically. The song's title is an acronym for Politically Lying, Unholy, Cowardly Killers, a phrase Serj later confirmed was also meant to evoke the phrase, "pluck the turkey," a deliberate and confrontational double entendre of the animal and the country. Lyrically, the song is a blunt denunciation of the genocide itself, the systems that enabled it, and the governments that have refused to acknowledge it. Lines like, "a whole race, genocide, taken away, all of our pride," refer directly to the Ottoman government's systematic extermination of Armenians in 1915, an event that resulted in the deaths of an estimated 1.5 million people through mass executions, forced displacement from their homelands, and death marches. The second verse expands this anchor into a demand: recognition, restoration, reparation. These lines are not metaphorical. They are literal, and directly reflect Serj Tankin's real-life activism through organizations such as the Armenian Youth Federation. Here, he calls for formal recognition of the genocide, restoration of land and dignity, and reparations to the descendants of victims. The repeated insistence on revolution, the only solution, in the chorus is not an abstract rebellion, but a response to a century of genocide denial. This is further reinforced by the following line, "We've taken all their shit, now it's time for restitution," which explicitly calls out the Turkish state's refusal to acknowledge responsibility, despite the genocide being foundational to the formation of the modern country. The danger of genocide denial goes beyond history. In 1939, before the Holocaust, Adolf Hitler reportedly dismissed concerns about mass violence by asking, "Who, after all, speaks today of the annihilation of the Armenians?" This quote is often cited not for its speaker, but for what it reveals. That silence and denial creates permission for future atrocities, such as those ongoing in the Middle East today. P.L.U.K. exists as a song precisely to reject that silence. The breakdown section, "Watch them all fall down," is one of the most haunting lines of the record. It can be read as a reference to the sheer scale of death during the genocide, as well as the forced death marches throughout the Ottoman Empire, where countless Armenians collapsed from starvation, exhaustion, or execution. The final line, "All in the system, down," is the only true title drop in the band's history, collapsing the album's themes of institutional violence, denial, and control into a single devastating statement. Musically and structurally, P.L.U.K. has the most complex developmental history on the album. It first appeared on Demo Tape 1 in a drastically different form. Nearly 6 minutes long, far heavier, and even more lyrically explicit. This version features a 2-minute extended outro, commonly referred to by fans as Hangman, that was ultimately cut from the album release. According to Serj's memoir, Down With The System, this section was supposedly removed to make the song hit even harder and more directly. Interestingly though, this extended version resurfaced later on the 1997 compilation album He Inc., which translates to We're Armenian, which honored the genocide and retained both the altered lyrics and the Hangman outro. This version is unique as it's the only demo available in high quality in an official capacity. In many ways, it functions like an alternate, more climactic version of the song, albeit much closer in sound to the final version. Much like how Ardo was to Aerials on Toxicity, Hangman would have worked perfectly as a hidden track on the album to conclude P.L.U.K, and I'm frankly upset it was cut as it's really good. P.L.U.K was first performed at System of a Down's debut concert at the Roxy on May 28, 1995, showcasing just how central the song has always been to the band's identity. It was mostly played frequently from 1998 to 1999, and again in 2002, and has since reappeared sporadically, most notably during major moments tied to Armenian remembrance, a total of over 110 performances. In 2015, marking 100 years since the genocide, the band underwent the Wake Up the Souls tour, where P.L.U.K was a setlist staple for one of the legs of the tour, serving as the intro for the second part of the show. Finally, on April 24, 2021, the United States formally recognized the Armenian genocide, something System of a Down had been publicly advocating for decades. As the closing track, the self-titled, P.L.U.K isn't just an ending, it's a statement of purpose. It completely strips away the usual metaphors, absurdity, and satire, leaving only anger, memory, and refusal to forget. In doing so, it sets the political and moral foundation for everything System of a Down would go on to create. Wait, but that's not all. As definitive and uncompromising as P.L.U.K is as a closer, it wasn't the only material System of a Down recorded during this era. Surrounding the self-titled sessions is a small but fascinating collection of B-sides and non-album tracks that further flesh out the band's early output and identity, quietly bridging the gap to Toxicity. These songs don't dilute the album's statement, so much as they expand its margins, exploring new and different ideas that didn't quite fit the album's narrative, it remained just as essential to understand SOD's evolution. When it came time to release the debut album in Japan, 2 such extra tracks were included as bonuses. Because CDs are significantly more expensive in Japan due to music taxes, it's a common practice to add exclusive materials to discourage importing cheaper foreign copies. That simple marketing decision is how the next 2 songs, Marmalade and Storaged, found their way into the band's official catalog. Marmalade is the 14th track on the Japanese release of System of a Down, the album's first bonus track, with lyrics by Serge Tankian and music composed by both Shavo Odojian and Darren Malakian. It was later released worldwide, except in Australia, fuck those guys for some reason, and the Toxicity CD single on January 22nd, 2002. The song has a short but peculiar history. It first appeared on Demo Tape 4 in a version already remarkably close to the final version, aside from some extra lines at the beginning of the second verse, slightly different vocal delivery, and minor guitar tuning differences. Its live debut came at the Whiskey A Go-Go on July 11, 1997, in a performance almost identical to this demo, and thus studio versions. Lyrically, Marmalade follows the band's tradition of food-inspired titles during the demo era, this time referencing the sweet, spreadable preserve. While abstract, the song is commonly interpreted as being about sex, hinted at through the lines like, "In sin we breathe, in sex we tie," and the bridge, "Marmalade flesh, naked spread, am I high." Here, the sensations of intercourse are compared to a drug-like, otherworldly experience. Unfortunately, as a System of a Down fan, I wouldn't notice, because we don't have sex. Marmalade was played with decent consistency from 1998 to 2000, and again in 2002. Since then, it's only appeared once in a blue moon, 8 times in 2015, and only twice in 2025, totaling roughly 60 live performances. Personally, I think that Marmalade is by far one of the most underrated System of a Down tracks. Non-stop, energetic, and featuring one of the best guitar solos in the band's history. It's definitely one of my favorites. Anyway, remember how I said that CUBErt was the least listened to album track in System of a Down's discography? Well, Marmalade, which was unavailable on streaming services until fairly recently, is a step below that. By far, one of the most obscure officially released System of a Down songs. But not the most obscure. That honor goes to the next track, Storaged. Following Marmalade, we move to one of the most brief and bizarre entries in the SOD catalog, Storaged. Clocking in at just 1 minute and 19 seconds, it's the third shortest System of a Down song, only behind 36 and Soldier Side Intro. It's also the inspiration behind the title of the bootleg compilation, Storaged Memories, which you might have heard. Storaged is the 15th track on the Japanese release of System of a Down, the second and final bonus track, with lyrics by Serge Tankian and music, again, composed by both Shavo Odojian and Darren Malakian. Like Marmalade, it first appeared on Demo Tape 4 in a version nearly identical to the final track. Its musical style is reminiscent of DDevil and CUBErt, fast, aggressive, and very short. Perhaps it was left off the album to avoid oversaturation of those types of songs. Lyrically, the song is abstract, uses heavy repetition, and seems to touch on themes of individuality, personal growth, and staying true to oneself. Lines like, "The fetus is mine," can be read as asserting ownership over one's choices, i.e. abortion, a theme somewhat re-explored in Revenge from Mesmerize, while "The Spinal line" urges strength, backbone, and integrity. Its title also flaunts accents, an umlaut on the O and an acute accent on the E, similar to New Guns from Steel Assault, though these likely have no real meaning beyond aesthetic. Although it looks low-key dumb as hell as a bilingual French speaker. Storaged, bro. Despite its short length, Storaged has only been performed live 7 times, 4 in 1997, twice in 1999, and once in 2003 for reasons undefined. Today, it remains one of the band's rarest tracks, and currently the only officially released song unavailable on streaming platforms. In fact, one of Storage's only physical releases outside of Japan is on a limited 7-inch vinyl version of the Toxicity single. It also appeared in the soundtrack of the direct-to-video Canadian animated film, Heavy Metal 2000. It's a brief capture of the band's early experimentation and absurdity which would define their catalog. But the story doesn't end with Storaged. Around the self-titled era, System of a Down also recorded a handful of non-album tracks that didn't make the cut, offering another glimpse into the band's evolution. These songs, Metro, Will They Die For You, and Shame, are like polished experiments, each carrying the same intensity and humor that defines Sode. They didn't quite fit on the album, but two of them are still great songs. The other one? Well, it's more interesting for its existence rather than its actual quality. First up is Metro, the first of 3 cover songs that the band recorded around this era. Surprisingly, this track has a deeper history than you might realize. It's a cover of the 1981 song, The Metro, by American band Berlin from their album Pleasure Victim. Yes, the same band that gave us Take My Breath Away from Top Gun. System of a Down completely transformed the song, taking a classic synth-heavy new wave song and turning it into something heavier, darker, and unmistakably theirs. The cover was first developed during warehouse parties in the mid-90s, where the band would jam on whatever Darren was into that week. These sessions included covers like Sultans of Swing by Dire Straits, a cover which reappeared many times in future shows, and Careless Whisper by Wham. But the Metro stuck with them, eventually appearing on their untitled 1995 demo tape, in a lo-fi, sludgy form with more aggressive vocals. By demo tape 4 in 1997, when it reappeared, the song had evolved into a version nearly identical to the studio release, which would reappear on the soundtracks for Dracula 2000, as well as Not Another Teen Movie. It would reappear again on the Toxicity single of 2002, as well as the Vicinity of Obscenity / Lonely Day EP in 2006, alongside their other 2 cover songs, Shame and Snowblind. Since this is a cover after all, I won't dwell too heavily on the lyrics, but a few changes from the original are worth noting. The first verse changes, "I'm alone, sitting with my empty glass," to "sitting with my broken glass," hinting at a night that the protagonist would rather forget, possibly a drunk one. In the chorus, "I remember a soldier sleeping next to me," becomes "standing next to me." My theory on this change is that the band thought it sounded kinda gay, because, quick trivia, this caused the line, "pull the tapeworm out of your ass," from Beatles to exist, as it was originally "my ass," and the band got into a huge argument over it. The penultimate line shifts from "I remember hating you for loving me" to the more confrontational "fuck you for loving me." These small alterations give the song a darker, more aggressive edge, while still honoring the original. Live, Metro debuted at the Dragonfly on April 21st, 1996, and was performed roughly 15 times through 1999, but hasn't resurfaced ever since. Despite its relative obscurity, the cover is a perfect showcase of the band's ability to reimagine a song completely, while still maintaining their signature intensity. And still, it's actually almost twice as popular as the original Berlin track. While Metro demonstrates Sode's skill in transforming others' work, the next track, Will They Die For You, comes from completely out of left field, giving us possibly the most bizarre song the band was ever involved in. We're going down to South Park. I'm gonna have ourselves a time. Next up is Will They Die For You, a song that exists less because System of a Down wanted to make it, and more because late 90s pop culture collided in the strangest way possible. The track appears on Chef Aid, the South Park album, released on November 24th, 1998, shortly after the Season 2 episode Chef Aid. As you probably already know, South Park needs very little introduction. In the episode, Chef claims that Alanis Morissette plagiarized his song Stinky Britches. A sleazy record executive retaliates by suing Chef for harassment, hiring none other than Johnny Cochran, fresh off the O.J. Simpson trial, who deploys his infamous Chewbacca defense. Chef is given 24 hours to pay up, and after a failed attempt to raise money through prostitution, he's sent to prison. To save him, Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny organize a benefit concert, calling in musicians Chef knows, such as Primus, Ozzy Osbourne, Elton John, and others. That episode directly spawned Chef Aid, a 21-track soundtrack made up of extended episode songs, older South Park tracks, and a handful of originals. One of those originals is Will They Die For You, the album's 8th track. Rick Rubin, System of a Down's producer, helped bring the recently debuted band onto the project, pairing them with rapper Maze for a remix of his 1997 song, Will They Die For You, from Harlem World. The track features Lil' Kim and was produced by none other than Sean Combs, who you might know as Diddy. Yeah, of course it was. Fortunately, the band wasn't involved with his parties. And yes, I watched 2 entire seasons of South Park and became a fan just to record this section of the video. System of a Down's role here is mostly instrumental, with Serge providing backing vocals in the chorus. Technically, this is a Maze track, not a Sode song, but it's the only non-system release where all 4 members participated and were credited as a band. That alone makes it worth discussing, not to mention just how bizarre the pairing is. Conceptually, it acts as an early prototype for the band's later rap metal experimentation, and it has never been played live. Lyrically, there isn't much to unpack. It's a very standard late 90s rap track, neither offensively bad or particularly memorable. However, one line really sticks out. Why must we kill our own kind? If that sounds familiar, it should. Serge would later reuse it far more effectively on Boom from Steal This Album. While the song's climax is admittedly cool, Will They Die For You is ultimately far more interesting for the circumstances behind its existence rather than the actual song itself. The track is also notable for being an instance where Serge Tankian says a certain word, one that clearly wouldn't fly today. But not the only one. And speaking of strange collaborations and uncomfortable lyrics that haven't aged well, let's talk about our final song, Shame, one of the most controversial songs in System of a Down's history.
Okay, we got 2 songs. We got Shame.
We now arrive at Shame, easily one of the most controversial tracks System of a Down has ever been involved in. The song is a cover of Shame on an N-Word, the second track from Wu-Tang Clan's landmark 1993 debut, Enter the Wu-Tang, 36 Chambers, and it was released on the notoriously poorly received compilation album, Cloud Rocks, on September 5, 2000. The album paired metal bands and artists with hip-hop ones, often with wildly mixed results. Shame opened the album, and it immediately stood out, for better and for worse. Like Metro, this is a heavily transformative cover. Wu-Tang's original is violent and confrontational, but relatively restrained and chill in tone. System of a Down reimagines it as something far more aggressive and chaotic, pushing the song firmly into their own style of music. Serge raps the intro, first verse, chorus, and second verse, while Wu-Tang member RZA performs the latter half of the track, including an entirely new third verse written specifically for this version of the song. And this is where the controversy begins. Serge Tankian repeatedly uses the N-word throughout the song, a total of 29 times, which understandably does not fly today. There's not a clean way around that fact, and it makes the song really uncomfortable for some listeners. While a long-standing rumor suggests that Serge was also uncomfortable and only performed the lyrics under pressure or under explicit approval from Wu-Tang, essentially being given an N-word pass, this has never been confirmed. While it's clear that the song has aged poorly because of this, it likely doesn't hold any actual or intentional racist intent. It's a bit of a shame, no pun intended, because Shame is actually a strong and energetic track. For some fans, including myself, it even served as an entry point into Wu-Tang Clan's catalog, which speaks to how effective the collaboration was music-wise, even though in hindsight, it's epically complicated. Live, Shame was performed only 4 times. Twice in 2000 and twice in 2002, all to notably unenthusiastic crowds. I mean, I'd probably react the same way if a white dude started yelling the N-word on stage. One of those performances took place at the 2000 Souls Benefit Show, a concert that is now largely lost media, despite also featuring covers like Radiohead's Paranoid Android, which is my favorite song of all time, and the first live performance of the song Aerials, Atwa, Bounce, and Shimmy from Toxicity, as well as Pictures from Steal This Album. The song's 4th and final performance was aborted by Darren Malakian mid-song, as you can hear right now. Unsurprisingly, Shame remains one of the least performed songs in the band's history, and yet, despite all this, it's seen a massive resurgence in the 2020s, becoming one of System of a Down's top 20 most daily streamed tracks, due largely to internet memes. Shame is a product of its time in a literal sense, capturing an era of cross-genre experimentation and pushing boundaries which made nu metal so popular. Taken together, these B-sides and covers don't feel much like leftovers from the album, so much as experiments that show just how quickly System of a Down was refining its sound, politics, and absurdity on the road to their next album, 2001's Toxicity. You might notice that I left one song out, but you'll just have to wait until the next video to find out. And with that, we've reached the end of System of a Down's self-titled era. From its raw, confrontational tracks to its strange and often overlooked B-sides, this period captures the band's unfiltered creativity and experimentation. Still rough around the edges, but already operating with a clear political voice and identity unlike anyone else in metal during the late 90s. What really makes this era so compelling isn't just how heavy and bizarre it is, but how foundational it feels to the discography as a whole. Nearly every idea the band would later refine, their anti-authoritarianism, humor, and cultural history have existed since the start. Through this, we can tell that System of a Down wasn't just a band figuring itself out, but instead, one clearly announcing themselves. In the next part of this retrospective series, I'll be covering Toxicity, the album that launched System of a Down into the mainstream and defines the heavy music and political landscape of the early 2000s. Even more so than this album, there's more background, lyrical content, and cultural context surrounding nearly every track on Toxicity. So, expect it to be long. Very long. Until then, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like, subscribe, and share this video with people, especially anyone who insists that Chop Suey was their first good song. Also, follow my Twitter, and I'll see you next time for Toxicity.